of week 2 in the third edition of India Gaming Show and Conference 2021, being organized by CII in association with Indian Digital Gaming Society and supported by the Department of Science and Technology, Department of Electronics and IT, and Department of Information and Broadcasting, Government of India. The theme of the third edition of India Gaming Show and Conference 2021 is Gaming for Good, Build in India, Build for the World. The conference, along with the show, is being hosted on the CII Hive digital platform, a dedicated multi-feature virtual online platform with a 24/7 help desk and a digital B2B lounge. Before we begin with today's program, I would like to take this opportunity to thank our partners, Google, Western Digital, Jet Synthesis Private Limited, Scientific Games, Hangama Games, Nodwin Gaming, Asus, Critical X Exports, Game.tv, and our content partner, KPMG, for extending their support. Currently, we have over 150 participants who've logged in and attending this session, both through CII Hive and YouTube. Further, I would request all the participants to kindly visit the virtual exhibition at the CII Hive anytime today or in the next 10 days. So before we begin with our first session, may I request all the speakers to kindly keep their mics on mute and unmute while speaking. The first session for the day is a panel discussion on decoding the rise of esports in India. The discussion will focus on the development of esports ecosystem in India, the relative maturity of the Indian esports ecosystem, and what are the future opportunities and challenges in this space. The panel discussion will be moderated by Mr. Akshat Rathi, co-founder and MD, Nodwin. Our other esteemed panelists for the session are Mr. Chris Hanna, CEO and co-founder, the Esports Observer, Mr. Ralph Richard, MD and co-founder, ESL Gaming, Mr. Rushendra Sinha, CEO and founder, Global Esports, Mr. Satya Raghavan, Director, YouTube, and Mr. Ankit Pant, Esports Players. With this, I would like to invite and hand over to Mr. Akshat Rathi to kindly take the panel discussion forward. Over to you, Mr. Rathi.
Thank you so much. Hello to everyone. A good morning, a good afternoon, and a good evening at different times of the world. Welcome to Esports. This is how we run. This is how we play. Wanted to go ahead and make sure that we are all aligned. Quick one on this, and most of us know each other. One of the reasons I wanted to go ahead and stitch everyone in this kind of a panel together is this context of what I call the key constituent pillars of esports, right? We have someone who's like Ralph, who's gone and built esports with his own hands over the multiple years. We have a team member who's someone who's built teams. We've got a player in Ankit, which is there. We have in Chris, we have a person who's looked at both India from an esports observer point of view, where it's contributed to a lot in terms of the visibility that is there, and you looked at India from an external point of view. And we also have Satya, who's joining us soon from a broadcaster's kind of view that's coming in. I wanted to just go ahead and actually open this up to this. Is this enough to start building what we call esports as such? And you guys have such a wealth of experience across this, or are there people missing here? For example, maybe, I don't know, sponsors or someone else. Chris?
Thanks for having me. I think, and let me start very differently. And it's funny because when we're talking about India, and it's a fact that I don't think people know, but I actually decided to move into esports after visiting India, because I met a person called Suboto Bakshi, who's also an author, built a company, and we were talking about risk. And I was afraid of switching my career and doing something new and just experimenting. And he basically taught me that there is no risk for me. So that actually what started my career in esports. And then we have Ralph on the panel who offered me my first job. So this is very interesting. It's an interesting panel. And when I look at India, and let me just zoom out and let's even go out of esports. So when people look at India, you often have this sheer mass of people in your head as well. And often when we talk about a lot of people think about China, but if you look at India, and I think 2020 population is around like 1.4 billion people. I was fortunate enough to go to IIM Bangalore, visit some courses, meet a lot of people. And if you just look at demographic in the world, India has so many young people that there is going to be a demographic shift anyway, right? So everything that's happening in India right now, at least from my perspective, there's so much potential. And if you put this into esports context, like almost everyone's a gamer. People feel like stigmatized when you talk about, oh, you're a gamer or not, because they don't want to be a gamer. But then anyone has, like, I don't know, Candy Crush on their mobile phones. So if you just look at that potential and you take these ingredients, I do believe that there is huge potential in India, but I also think that most people don't understand the market, and that includes me. So that we're now covering like bits and pieces of the market in India with the Esports Observer because we want to educate people. And for me, it's the same learning, because I cannot tell you what's going on in India. Right now we get some numbers, but it's super hard to observe the market. But if you look at the growth and specifically take mobiles, the way I see this, like people in India kind of leapfrog landlines. So, you kind of went almost straight to mobile. So mobile gaming is a huge thing, and there's massive potential. So is there potential also for sponsors? Are people missing out? I do believe they do. Specifically, there's so much infrastructure that you can build up now for just a way bigger audience, right? So I do believe that there is an advantage in looking at the market and also like getting involved with the market. And then you look at some of these like crazy growth numbers. You look at internet penetration rate, and I just like the numbers I found is like 27. We had like 4% in India, so now we're at around almost 50. Like that's huge growth in relatively short amounts of time. So to just answer this, I do believe there's a massive opportunity. I do believe people are missing out, but I also think that people need more education on the market, and there just needs to be more coverage on what's actually going on and how that can benefit. You mentioned sponsors. What are the opportunities for them? What's all the stuff going on? I think there needs to be more information and education.
Satya coming back today. Hey, Satya, welcome. We all try to go out and solve technology very differently, right? This is one of the more complex ones to go out and solve technology on. But Ralph,
as well.
yeah. But Ralph, I think Chris just mentioned you gave him his first job. You gave me the first opportunity to go out and do something in esports a good 5 years ago. How have you seen India grow?
I mean, this is obviously complex, but I actually didn't took the job, Chris, right? So I offered him, but I didn't give him the first job. Anyway, that's not so important detail. Look, when we first met, which is 7 years ago, I would even say, right? So a little bit longer. I had a very limited understanding of India. So this is a two-sided affair, right? It's not me explaining you how to build esports. It's you explaining me how India works. And I think for me, as the ignorant Westerner, the number one thing that always stuck is when you told me, look, India is not only a country, it's a continent, right? You need to think about it like you actually think about Europe, which as European, I always feel we can relate to. With Americans, we don't have any in this panel, right? It's a little bit more complicated because even up until today, there's a lot of Americans who think that Europe is a country rather than a continent. So I think it's a little bit that same diversity, complexity, the beauty of it. I think in terms of esports, look, it's still day one or day zero for all of us, right? So even though I guess you would argue that in Germany esports may be a little bit more advanced than in India on some levels, on other levels, it is still so freaking early that this is a little bit of a theoretical discussion to some extent, number one. And number two, as you knew a few years ago, and now everyone knows, is that mobile is going to totally change how the world consumes gaming and esports as general thing, and how countries like India, who still have a challenge on the pure infrastructure, landline, fixed internet line discussion, but purely through mobile, can maybe leapfrog and be maybe even ahead in some of those things.
Brilliant. And then thank you so much, Ralph. And I think as we built esports, and I'll come back to you about some of the other models. Satya, bringing you in, YouTube's obviously gone and done phenomenal things with esports in America. And you've seen India explode in this thing called gaming and esports. And what's your view as a broadcaster? Is this cool? Is this legit? Is this a flash in the pan? And what's the one that is what's working for India?
Yeah, no, thanks for having me here, and I hope you all can hear me. Contrary to I think what Ralph was trying to theorize about, are we on day 0 or are we on day 1? I think it's already happening, and it's happening like gangbusters at this point of time, right? But the interesting thing is the way in which you would think about it traditionally, which is, there has to be a rights holder, and there has to be a league, and there has to be a publisher. The interesting thing about India is the sheer way in which users and, when you talk about YouTube, our own creators are actually just embracing the whole concept of esports and tournaments and games, right? I mean, who would have thought that, two people would get together and start a tournament? Who would have thought that one person would think of doing a chess tournament, right? Or it's a bit like that, the entrepreneurial spirit that we Indians are supposed to possess fably. We all grew up with our own street corner cricket tournament, our own colony badminton tournament, right? And they were as fiercely contested as an India-Pakistan match was watched, right? So I think that is the other thing that I feel very unique. So while platforms like YouTube, we work with esports rights holders across the world and in India as well. The interesting thing is really the way in which, a very nice little pyramid of sorts is emerging, right? Where right on top you can have, publisher-driven tournaments or esports driven by independent organizations. But I think in the top of this pyramid is where some really interesting things are happening. And I also feel that just two people getting together and playing a game is a tournament. Or even, funnily enough, just a single person streaming a game is also him or her trying to better themselves, right? And you can't have that in any other thing other than esports in that sense. So yeah, so it's very interesting times.
We have Ankit, who's one of your YouTube stars, who does really cool stuff around it. Ankit, you've grown up in esports, right? You used to be a Counter-Strike guy, you used to be a team guy, and now you're a great content creator with loads of brands with you. And you've been always engaging with your community as such. And recently you're playing Valorant, and you were playing other things. How have you seen esports evolve for you? Unmute. Just in case, you need to unmute.
Can you hear me now? Oh, sorry. Yeah, so I was saying esports is growing thanks to, guys like you. I remember sitting on plastic chairs with, very low FPS PCs and playing tournaments in colleges to now playing on stages like, ESL India Premiership and many more. So I have seen the build and, the growth happen, but I think it will still take some time to, for the players to be a more mature. And there I see, teams like Global Esports coming in. I've seen their teams and their content. It's pretty good. The professionalism is coming back now. The maturity might take some time, but eventually, if, as you said, if everyone of us, like from the broadcasters' point of view, from the publishers, from team owners, if we come together and maybe create a league or something of that sort where you guys, the major stakeholders, have control, I think that will help the players more to understand certain things. Now, in my case, touchwood, I was blessed to have you guys maybe around me, and I could see a lot of things. I used to follow a lot of international teams and players when I started, and I saw that these guys are not dependent only on prize money. And it was very difficult for me as a player to make my parents understand that let me do this, because eventually my age was, I was growing and I had to take care of my family and stuff like that. So I thought, I saw what these international players and teams were doing and how are they generating revenue, and that's when I decided to switch gears, that I'll do this also, and while I'm doing this I'll try to concentrate on brand endorsement and stuff like that. And I remember after I did that MTV U Cypher League, I became the brand ambassador of Alienware, then brand ambassador of Intel. I was sponsored by Corsair, now India's first and only Red Bull athlete for gaming. So when these brands started supporting me while I was playing tournaments also, streaming also, and when the money started coming into my account, that's when my parents, relatives, and everyone started noticing, okay, this is a viable career for sure. Otherwise, this guy wouldn't be generating so much money and revenue. And after that, once that BBC World News went on air, that was like a biggest boost for all my mamas and relatives who had done MBAs from big universities, and that's when they started taking me seriously. Okay, he's not just wasting his life, ये मतलब almost हमारे जैसा ही कमाने लग गया है. So that was their dialogue when we were in the room sitting and chatting. And now we are proud of you. You are actually making money. And then they started focusing more. Now I have seen them, presenting my PPTs and my presentations in their own, conferences and telling their companies to, gaming is the next big thing. See, this is the guy, and we can do so much more and all of that. So it's a proud feeling that from a guy who was, an average student, but he was very good at playing games. While people thought that iska kuch nahi hoga, he won't do anything in life. He's just wasting his life behind a computer screen. From there, this computer screen only gave me so much that I have renovated my house. I'm planning to buy a car now. The esports actually built me and actually made me what I am today, to be very honest. So things are looking pretty good, I would say, for India.
Thank you. No, and this gaming for hope and this thing that you can actually choose something that you can be great in. Rushendra, you've been looking at doing both of those, both at a global level where you were one of the teams that went to the Overwatch World Cup itself, representing India, but also you've got this really swanky content house that you've been talking about. So tell us how you're actually. Is sporting excellence the big thing for you? Is fame the big thing for you? How do you as a team owner go ahead and balance both content generation and excellence and being number one?
So firstly, thank you so much, Akshat, for having me on this panel. And, I really want to say congratulations to Ankit Pant as well. He's been doing a really good job. And also, Chris, love the fatherhood banner. I'm going to get myself one of those. I love that. I had to make sure that I made a remark on that. So coming to the question, Akshat, I think something that what you rightly said was initially when we started off on our journey, we realized that we wanted to, kind of be the best competitive team, and we focused a lot on the esports aspect of things. But as we got more involved in the ecosystem, as we grew, we realized that we had to give equal, if not more, weightage to content creation as well. And that's why, as you mentioned, we recently announced our content house, which is a 3-story penthouse with a private pool, and we have like our own gym and squash court. We wanted to provide all these facilities, not just to the athletes, but the content creators that we have in there. That's why we call it the content house. Our focus is primarily going to be on creating as much content as we can out of that place. While for the athletes, we're also setting up our Esports Arena, which will be announced later this month in Bandra itself, where we will have all our players train out of. We have our scrim rooms, our streaming rooms, and that's where all the magic is going to happen on the competitive front. But primarily, we are looking at trying to find that balance right now between content creation and competitive. We're not so focused on ensuring that we have the best team in every sport, as long as we are at least in the top 3. But we want to make sure that when it comes to content, that we're everywhere.
And Ralph, this is a great time to go ahead and ask you. I remember I was sitting with you and Alex at your house watching the Football World Cup a couple of years ago. You've seen teams go ahead and be FaZe Clan, you've teams be Navi, you've seen teams be Evil Geniuses and Cloud9 and everyone, which is the 100 Thieves across this. As a person who sits at a TO side, and long ago, you even had SK Gaming. Is there a formula for this?
To run a proper team, the answer is yes and no, right? I think I think it's like with every. I mean, teams are extremely versatile compared to what we're doing, Akshat, right? We're providing an infrastructure in a good way, and we combine this with a fancy brand and the target group. For a team, it can basically pick its battle much easier. So it is on the one side much more open, a more open playing field. On the other side, it goes down to being successful. So I think in the world of a team, number one, because you're not so linked to the regional aspect, which I still don't believe in, and no experiment so far has shown me that it's the dominating way to do it. As a team, you need to create an identity, and that identity can be the thieves or the good ones or the mediocre one, whatever. Right? It's a very broad marketing field. So building a team is at its core an identity and marketing exercise. Number one. I think number two, what is hard about building a team is to create a proper business model about it. Right. I think all of the endemic esports parts are still very dependent on sponsorship, which is a very it's a tough business. You need to convince people to think and to believe in you in the long run. It's right. It's very similar to raise money for investments, as you know. So the monetization part is tough on the team side. So it needs actually extremely passionate, smart, and convincing people to do this. And last, I mean, teams are such an important part of this industry because they are the hosts to players. They are the ones who ultimately build talent. They are the ones who hopefully grow talent and educate players. We as a tournament organizer only indirectly do it. But this actually goes back to your first questions, right? What are the relevant stakeholders in esports? And it's actually all of them. It starts obviously with the game, goes to the player, which is enabled by the team, where our job is actually to enable the team, the players, and the game, right, as tournament organizers, and then who gets accelerated by the flywheel of sponsorships and broadcasters and ultimately the media rights, and then hopefully goes back into the next game. So all of those pieces are dependent on each other and need to happen at one point, at the same point in time, and if there's a physical tournament, even at the same place. And that's a little bit the magic of esports. It looks so easy from the outside, but it's actually really hard to pull off, as you specifically know.
And Ankit, I'm going to just skip back here. You ran a team, right? You ran Brutality for the longest time ever. And you had a core of 3 forever to go ahead and bank on, and then over time that moves on. Is running a team tough?
Yeah, it is very tough because in India I've seen one thing: no one really cares about contracts, and there is lack. As a player, I know I shouldn't be saying this, but I know that for a fact that there's lack of professionalism in the scene. I have heard from a lot of big players telling me that you did the right move of not going ahead and you banked on 3 players only, because see, a brand will definitely help you with salaries and stuff. But eventually, if within 3 months or 6 months you break a team and jump off for some more money, then that brand who is pitching you to a bigger brand to help him get sponsorship and all, that is not going to help. And I had seen this from a very from the time where I started. Ki if I am doing this, I am doing this with three core players. And the moment Juventa told me that I'll be focusing on my business now, that's when I told, okay, me and Rix either will play or we'll maybe join a team. But if I'm doing this, then I'm definitely not paying anyone anything till the time 6 months they are sticking together, because those 3 guys who were my friends, I've been playing them for since more than 5 to 8 years, more than that. And I knew that these guys are not going to jump to any other team even if they're paid more. So that's how I could build my Brutality. I could build the brand, and they were with me, and we could get so many sponsors and so much branding. So it is difficult, but now, as you said, we need to build a league. Once you do that, once you control the people might think controlling is not the right way. You should just give everyone a free for all. But that's what's happening in the scene right now. You are giving them that much liberty that they don't really care. People are just happy to win in India, and maybe go on their social media and brag about that I am the number 1 team, I'm the number 2 team, I'm the number 3 team. That eventually on their social media, through their Facebook, through their YouTube, they might say that we want to conquer Asia, we want to conquer the world. But I have not seen that happening. But now, after teams like Global Esports and stuff, I think these guys are taking it seriously. So they have certain regulations and rules which they maybe will put in the contract. Well, they'll take control of it. Otherwise, it was like how we play gully cricket down my building. that is what was happening in the scene. And if this is happening, then no matter how much broadcasters try or how much Nordwin Gaming tries, you guys are giving us the platform. But if as players we are not taking it seriously, then it's our fault. We can't keep crying about we are not getting enough salaries, we are not getting enough good computers. From 1.6, I've been hearing this from players that you know on the stage there was one fan, we are not getting good good atmosphere to play. The table is up and down, there are uh, some things on the table which our mousepad is sticking to, we are not able to perform. But now everything, to be honest, I've seen that in Nordwin Gaming events, in all the big events, everything is proper. Now why the what's the issue that you're not able to perform and you're not able to stick to one team and maybe continue that for years like how international teams do? Now they will say that we are not getting good opportunities. You are getting every damn thing right now, to be very honest. And I'm telling this to all the Indian players because I've been there, I have known them. Now broadcasters are supporting. I was talking to Hari from YouTube, Shilpa from YouTube. They are ready to help esports players, help gaming, and they were asking me who else can we help. And I was ready to I gave them all the names. Nordwin Gaming is doing so many tournaments. Global Esports has got a content house. Publishers are ready to help. Now what's the problem? So now the question is, are the players ready to take it to the next level, or are they happy in just earning like 30,000-40,000 rupees per month and they say that this is our life? So this is one thing that I have noticed. And yes, it is very difficult to run a team if you don't have a bank of lawyers and a bank of money ready to go after them. Because once if that incident happens, then only I think the professionalism is people will start taking it seriously. Okay, nahi, if I break this contract, then something bad is going to happen. In my case, my word of mouth is my contract. There are so many brands who don't even sign contracts with me. They're like, okay, you said it, we'll do it. And I've been renewing contracts. It's not like I'm saying that I'm the only esports athlete in India who has maximum brand endorsements. This is my 5th year with Dell and Alienware. This is my 4th year or 3rd year with Intel. This is my 5th year with Corsair. This is my 3rd year with Red Bull. These guys have multiple options. What is the reason they're sticking with me?
So, and Chris, this is a great time to go ahead and do this, right? You have across the world a very strong presence as CEO, where you've seen markets evolve, and you comment on multiple markets. When people like Global Esports, Rushan, and when people like Ankit are talking, do you think this market's ready for an inflection point right now? Where something big is about? I'm not going to say what's happening, but is this that time where you go ahead and say there is an opportunity to level something up?
I mean, I think it's kind of time to get involved anyway, right? As I said earlier, and I don't want to just echo what everyone said, but if you look at what Ralph said and what has been said across the board now, I can just give you some context on how I look at the space. And to me, it's what Ralph said as well. It's like marketing and branding, but then there's a completely different part of it, which is monetization, right? And when we look at, I mean, you just heard all the deals, how like long year deals, and that's branding. That's somebody built a brand, and people trust in that. So I think that you need to find these kind of gems, and that's where you can put your money in support. So I do believe that again there is an opportunity to do these kind of things. But even if you let's look at kind of developed esports, right? So we look at developed esports, take, I don't know, Overwatch League, Call of Duty League, take League of Legends, take all these games. And now look at the top leagues and pick the top teams. And now tell me what they stand for. Like go top to bottom and tell me, like there's so many that are doing a bad job in branding, right? Where you say, I don't even know what this is. And if you look at brand deals, like why would a brand give you money? Because they want to associate, like, of course they want to get reach, but they want to, associate themselves with something. Kind of core values goes back to like company branding. Like, what is it you stand for? And if I partner with you, what is it I can gain from this? And what can I give you in return? And I think even in these so-called like, big developed leagues, there's so many teams that just missed that point. And take Shanghai Dragons. We talked about success, but take Overwatch League, Shanghai Dragons lost every game. People were completely hyped, and kind of loved them for losing all games. And I'm not saying like losing is way to go, but I do believe that it's really important to build something that you stand for, to really stand out in the market. And I do believe that's the opportunity. And I'm not even saying it's tied to a specific market. But once you have the audience, how are you going to monetize it? And then you mentioned like 100 Thieves, clothing. You mentioned Faceland, more of a network. Look at all the different kind of teams and what they're doing to actually try and monetize their audience. It's very different approaches. So the money is not necessarily in kind of esports, it's more about how do you monetize, the audience that you gathered. And that always is the question on, what are the opportunities now? Look at your market. I mean, obviously with all the things you're doing, and I can make you a panelist, Akshat, if you want, and ask you a question, but with all the stuff you're building, what did you see? I mean, obviously there's opportunity, right? So it's just a matter of, can you educate people properly? Can you convey that message? And what can people actually gain? And to me, it's like, it's all a branding exercise initially, because how do people see you? How do people see your company? How do people perceive what you do? It's how you brand yourself, and it's sticking to kind of core values, but also having them. So is there an opportunity? 100%. Is there a kind of point, for growth? 100%. You just need these kind of, let me say, like pockets or whatever you want to call them, where you can actually help a brand understand the market, and then, help them be successful with you. It's like, it's grow together.
No, and Satya, I think this is a brilliant question, right? You have your YouTube, right? You're pretty much the guys that get this, the beliefs I used to go ahead and get. I bet you guys also get it, saying we need to do something in gaming, make it happen. It's a cool thing, right? And then your sales team will go ahead and say this, and then look at it, and then let's say it doesn't matter what this. It's a phone brand, it's a watch brand, it's a condoms brand, it's a toothpaste brand. I don't care what's coming. They'll all come back and say gaming's this buzzword, and you are obviously one of the largest advertising networks in the world. And then they come to YouTube because they need to buy media inventory. And then you need to go ahead and build context out of this brand out of this, which needs to be salient to this, which is there. What's that challenge which is there? And I know you and Shilpa and the entire team has been working really hard at it. But what's the challenge, and where are the opportunities that you're seeing out of this?
Yeah, no, I think the challenge and opportunity both, Akshat, is actually the way in which we as an ecosystem can actually evolve this, right? The direction that we can take it in, right? So it is obvious that, you will compare this to the way things happen in television. But maybe we should all think about, is that the right model? If you look at TV and let's say you look at cricket, right? So you have the one IPL, so to speak, right? And it's great that now there are other such leagues in other sports as well. But I worry a lot about the way in which things get concentrated, right? In that sense, right? So how do we as an ecosystem create many such opportunities, right? Maybe the time now is actually first to diverge, to disperse, and then aggregate, rather than try to aggregate things at this point of time, right? So that's the only thing that I keep thinking about, saying that, look, is this a place where 1,000 esport tournaments will bloom, right? Or are we all looking for that one big thing, right? So I think as an ecosystem, we should think hard about it, because given that it's digital, given that it's the core philosophy of digital is that it should be easily accessible to all, and there aren't any gatekeepers. How do we create that ecosystem and that directional movement, out of which we can all then learn, regroup, and then figure out what works best, right? And that's the same thing that applies. I mean, if you again look at television, and if you look at cricket, you'll see that the largest of the advertisers is the one who then can afford that thing, and then consequently perhaps grow larger. But there are a whole lot of advertisers who can then not tap into that phenomenon. So how do we then create more opportunities for more advertisers, right? An advertiser should not be thinking that, hey, this is, not a part of my affinity, because brands think that way. So there are a lot of brands who will say, okay, my affinity is male who likes cricket, and hence let me do cricket, right? But how do you make this how do you color this as a broader canvas, so that any kind of brand actually sees this as a consumer moment, and then, goes deeper into that over time, right? So I think that's the challenge and the opportunity both that at least we are grappling with here in India.
So, and Ralph, as one of the TOs that I've learned a lot from, there's these marquee properties, right? The ESL ones, the IEMs of the world. Then there's also DreamHack in the portfolio right now. And then there were always the national championships, and we're sitting below that. We had even Go for Cups as opportunities for people to go out and not only play, but also brands to get this. But some things work for advertisers, some things have not, and you have a very strong team that can go ahead and sell. Is this what Satya said works? Is this a global thing that can work, or do you think it is going to be an India phenomenon or an emerging market phenomenon?
Frankly, I didn't really understand what Satya was saying, so maybe you can clarify this a little bit going on. I think what we've seen, and one part I understood there, though, right? It's when we think about any sports, and esports is not so different. We think about a pyramid. There's only one World Cup. There's not a World Cup every week, right? Because that uniqueness, that legacy comes out of scarcity. So scarcity is an important part of any sports property, actually of any content property. But I think there is a misconception, and I think that was where Satya was going as well, is that scarcity needs to be totally crazy over scarce, so to speak. What do I mean by that? In football, which is going to be the same as cricket in India, football in Europe, for the last 30 years, people were actually every year saying, hey, there's more football being broadcasted next year. This is probably going to be the death of football because at one point there's going to be too much content and no one's going to watch it. Hence, when no one's watching it, the consumer will decide. No newspaper, panel, whatever will decide. What do I mean by that is that when we look at Counter-Strike, when we look at Dota, when we look at PUBG Mobile, actually we're still at a point where there's probably too little content and not too much. Means on the lower bottom and middle of the pyramid, more tournaments are always better than less. More content is always better than less. And on the top of the pyramid, comparable to the Grand Slams or the World Cup, there will be things like an IEM Katowice, which is built over the last 7-8 years. The international has built over the last 10 years, which will be above and beyond because of consistent relevance. It's not because one person once put in a lot of money for 1 year or because it has been advertised well for a year. It's the consistency and the legacy of something meaningful. So on top of the pyramid, of that sports pyramid, which kind of every sport has, there's always going to be a little bit of scarcity. There's always going to be, again, a very clear, consistent building of properties. And I've said in many interviews, I guess, hope and want that IEM Katowice is there in 100 years from now. Like Wimbledon is still there. So yeah, long story short, there's a mix between more content is better than less content. And on the top, there is a certain scarcity, but it shouldn't be anywhere near scarce as people historically thought and still probably think today.
Yeah, and Akshat, let me just kind of respond to what Ralph was saying. I think you're absolutely right, the pyramid structure. I think what I'm trying to say is there have to be many such pyramids, right? And perhaps in the Indian context, right, the mind goes to cricket as a great parallel. And if you look at Indian television, it's pretty much dominated by cricket, and cricket is dominated by, let's say, the IPL in that sense, right? So how do we create that scenario? And I like the football model, right? And the reason why there is so much football is actually because of the fact that there are many large countries in Europe, each of whom have their own league, which is rival to none in that sense, right? So it's not just the one World Cup, but it's also leagues that exist in many countries, whether it is stuff in Italy or whether it's stuff in the UK and things like that. So how do you create that, and how do you not create scenarios where maybe it's only one game and then that one pyramid for that one game? How do you create a scenario where there are multiple games, each of whom have their own tournaments? Because you might have an advertiser who's a taker for that particular tournament, right? An advertiser might like to be a part of a chess tournament, but might not want to be a part of another kind of tournament. So how do we create that decentralization or democratization in that sense?
Chris, do you want to have some comments on this?
Like the thing I want to say to this really is if you just take what's been said before and then let's go back a while where we talked about, oh, everyone's going for we're the biggest team, we're the best team, we're going to conquer this and this and that. I think if you look at content, yes, there definitely can be more content, but I think the opportunity also lies in realistic expectations and, in really communicating what people will get, depending on what they invest in. Because everyone goes out and everyone's number one brand, everyone's like leading, everyone's, overselling. Like I feel like specifically teams and a lot of entities are overselling, exposure, what brands can expect, for day one on a stream, etc. And I think that, if we step back from that, we're just being a little bit more honest about certain things. then I think there is enough space. And you mentioned a couple of really different brand segments, right? I do believe there's opportunities for all of them to get involved. It's just a matter of not trying to completely oversell them, and then they're going to be disappointed. Like, if we're a little bit more realistic with our expectations in certain areas, I do believe there is a chance for everyone to get involved, and we can grow the whole industry rather than trying to be number one in everything.
Rishi, just as you've been building a team that is both relevant for India and also to international investors, and you're going through a fundraise round. What's liked by investors in teams? I often read this Forbes article. It says the top 10 esports companies in the world, and Ralph, you and me don't get, and anyone of us don't get mentions in there. It's only teams in there. So, when you go on.
I think the teams get a lot of the glory, especially when they're on stage with the trophies and all the viewership that you guys bring on board. So that a lot of credit obviously does go to the publishers and the TOs. But yeah, I think the team aspect of it is really interesting, especially when it comes to what investors are looking at. We've actually had a lot of investors ask us, based on data, that teams, as per, if you just break down the data just off of tournament winnings, teams by itself are not profitable unless you have a layer of sponsorship on top. And if you are an international team that has a lot of eyeballs and you are also creating content and each player has their own social media fan following that is significant, then endemic brands get really excited. Non-endemic brands are still on the edge of it. So a lot of investors have actually asked us, why you still continue to have teams even though it's not a profitable business? But obviously esports are the crux of it, the team aspect of it. The entire esports pyramid would fall without the teams. The teams are one of the most essential aspects of the pyramid, and that's why we are so focused on growing that aspect of it. And when a lot of times they ask us, why are you doing it when it's not profitable, our answer is always, it's not profitable yet. We're still trying to figure out new and innovative ways. We're having collaborations with big content creators, with streamers, working away, whether it's players in India or with our international teams. So even with our teams in Singapore, South Korea, with our players that were transferred to the Overwatch League, that transfer itself was also a transaction. So that added to an additional revenue source that we could look at. But the fun aspect is a lot of people, not just in India, are still figuring it out. And I guess everyone is finding a different way of doing it. Some people with merchandise, some people with content, some people with sponsorship. As long as each team can find out what their niche is or what they're good at, they can start monetizing it and really put their attention there. That would make them more profitable. Another aspect of the whole team thing is I think everyone is fighting for a big piece of the existing pie. And what we are focusing on and what you guys have been doing as well is focusing on growing this entire pie so that there's more for everyone as opposed to trying to fight for a bigger chunk of the existing pie.
Ralph, just one more time, I'll bring you back into this. Is franchising / media rights the only way that teams can be valuable?
No. I mean, look, I think, there's two very different questions, right? I think media franchising is, if I look at purely from a team owner perspective, obviously a nice way to manifest an investment, right? It is, for me, it has less to do with sports. It has more to do with financial arithmetic, if I look at it from a purely concept. But a franchising is only valuable as long as you have one. That's the funniest thing, because there's a very scarce and limited asset. Actually, most of the teams go out and don't have a franchise slot. It's, when people talk about it, this is like totally overseen. There's 16 team owners in the world who think that's the best thing in the world. And there is another 6,000 team owners who think, this is the worst thing in the world. Number one. Number two, it is one way, but it's not the only way. It's limited, it's scarce. But on the other side, it's fairly fixed in a way that it needs to be in a game that's successful. We have seen, two specific, maybe 3 games, which are timeless. That is Counter-Strike, League of Legends, and Dota. Let's see if there's any other game which are timeless. You could argue even to some extent Call of Duty, although on a much, much slower, smaller level, much less international. But anyway, we'll see. A franchise is only as good as the success of the game, and therefore you have invested a lot of money. It limits your ability to be agile, actually. So there's pluses and minuses on that one. So I guess as a team owner, we'll always have a positive but attitude to it. On the media rights, I think, I mean, the easy answer is it's YouTube just should spend a lot of money on acquiring esports media rights, and it should all be easy, right? It's going to give us a lot more money, we can invest more, and the market will easier thrive. Honestly, they're paying what they can make of it, right? So media in the world we're living in, and then it's a fact for all of digital broadcasting, is monetizing at a much lower rate than traditional television is doing, which I'm not here to judge. It's neither good or bad. It's just what it is. So number one. And number two, if you look at media rights in traditional sports, way more than 50% of that is based on consumers paying for it, right? It's all behind a paywall. It is connected to a bundle. So esports fans and the way content is working these days, and the time has changed from having actually scarcity to content to have every type of content you can think of, thanks actually to YouTube, Twitch, and all other digital pro. I have a hard time seeing it really being behind a paywall. So to some extent, I believe esports will always, relatively speaking, under-monetize to traditional sports on media rights, which is a challenge for everyone involved, not only for teams. Number two, actually, traditional will slowly go into that direction as well. So the media rights will be less valuable. But if you compare this to actually the gaming industry, if we think 15 years back, every game was a boxed sell. So people would need to go out and pay $50 or $60 to play a game. That's the old model. That's the traditional media rights model. Now it's all free to play with virtual items and all of that stuff. And I'm a big believer, I would even go as far as I know, that the difference to traditional sports will be actually stopgapped by items around esports within the game on an additional layer of the game. We've just seen the non-fungible token, top shots, all of those blockchain alternatives of owning something around the competition, being that moments, being that cards, being that players. All of that will have actually a disruptive impact on what we know as esports. Will actually bring in that proper fan monetization, which we're still missing, which we as an industry need to figure out and need to aggressively speak to. ESL, we've just done our first deal with Epic's GG, which is a pure trading card deals, not blockchain yet, but with actually 13 teams involved. So it's really for the first time that an independent tournament organizer could bundle those rights and create a proper offering for fans. And this was for us more a blueprint deal to do many more of those, including blockchain, but not limited to it. And that through the course of the next 3 to 5 years will, I'm pretty sure, stopgap that traditional media rights gap, which will not go away anytime soon, and maybe will never go away. But that's fine, because we're living in a different world. The internet is a demand-driven, whereas what the old media world has been a supply-driven industry. And there are ways to solve for this, and they're right in front of us.
Super brilliant. And Chris, I want to go ahead and bring this in, which is that I remember sitting with you in the Berlin office, and you were thinking about going and figuring out, even in news content for someone like TEO, which does a lot of content around this, but from the business side, you were saying, is advertising the pure model for just content and written content, which is there, or should it be behind a paywall, like a subscription where you can go and be as part of sports media journal? Besides YouTube, besides this, you are also one of those people who are trying to grapple with this monetization. How have you thought about this?
That's a really good question, and I need to go a little. I need to go back a little bit, because I think that journalism is changing, and I think that if you look at the internet, like things like Twitter became a primary source. So if you look at how do people consume content, right? So there's content consumption that's changing. People consume content like on a lot of different platforms, and a lot of it. And then you have like journalism. So I often, and I got to say this openly, right? I often read stuff on Twitter before I read it on the Esports Observer. And the information I get on Twitter, for me, often is enough. because I want transactional information, right? So what happened? Okay, Notwin invested in something cool. That's what I need to know. And then I know you, and if I really need to know more, I can probably figure it out. That's a luxury for me, but that's how I deal with it. But then you have, old-fashioned kind of journalism where you have to process information, right? You got to have sources, and then you process a lot of information. And I do believe that everyone can get sources today, and easily, but processing a lot of information that's available and really, giving context on things specifically for journalism, that's something that's really expensive. That's what people want, but that's also really expensive. So we've been exploring a lot, and there is a metered wall on TEO. So there are certain articles that you can read for free, and then we at least want to know who you are. There is no paywall, but I think that it just comes back to quality. If you want to create quality content, and that's for esports teams, that's kind of for everyone, it is expensive, and you need to find a way to monetize it. For us, we haven't figured it out yet. We're still trying to figure it out, but I do believe that at one point we need to hit a certain quality that people would be willing to pay for it, and then we can experiment further with different kind of concepts. Because in the end, I cannot pay my people in page views. I cannot pay them in. A lot of people read this. At one point we need to make money with the things we do.
And Satya, for you, do you see those different long form, short form contents monetizing very differently, even for someone like you? Would you be open to someone like making a movie on esports in India and putting it as a YouTube original? I know you guys don't do it, but just play with it. That's the construct. Does that still work?
Yeah, no, absolutely right. And think about it, right? YouTube fundamentally started off as a video on demand platform, right? And over the years, it's got amazing live capabilities. So a lot of live stuff happens at this point of time. But I always wonder, about the tournament that happened. It happens on a given day, or the final happens on a given night, and a whole lot of people end up missing it, just like they would perhaps when it is broadcasted. But ultimately, it stays on as VOD. But what is the VOD experience, right? Even that VOD which stays back can be monetized. But what is then the right experience you're giving to the user who comes in afterwards, right? So a good mix of content formats, a good mix of windows are things that we'll have to kind of think through in that sense. We've seen that happen in cricket, where people consume a lot of content on YouTube. So while the IPL is happening ostensibly on another platform, YouTube is buzzing with people who are actually, giving their views, giving their opinions, and creating things with all that content that happened elsewhere in that sense, right? So one also has to think about multiple platforms and how can you then monetize it across the spectrum, right? A whole lot of short form video platforms are out there at this point of time. So what is the esports equivalent for short form video platforms, right? So right from a player to a team owner to the sponsor to the platform, we all need to think about all of these opportunities, right? So which is why I go back to what I said in the beginning, and I think it's important to see it that way, which is how do we diverge at this point of time when things are just kind of coming together at this point of time, experiment a bit, and then learn from that, right? We all talked about, and Ralph put it very eloquently, about multiple revenue streams. We're seeing a lot of that happen on the platform right now, especially in gaming, which is people actually, fans who are actually paying the creator directly. So how do we make that even more exciting? So yeah, so many things to do. All of us need to put our heads together to kind of think through all of these.
We just have a couple of minutes left, but I do want to go ahead and ask one thing there. So, Ankit, you've been quiet for some time because I've not asked you this question, but I think this conversation was happening last night when I asked you how does everything perform for you, and your super chat, your subs, your everything else, which is so without divulging what numbers. What works better for you? Do subs work better for you? Does super chat work better for you? Just does advertising work better for you? And then just from there, Rushi, if you can close that out, does that also translate to you going and coming up with new formats as both as a content creator and as a team owner? Does that apply? Ankit?
I think memberships definitely are very consistent and they work. But then again, super chats, the bigger ones, like I received 1.5 lakhs INR once. And after that, that was like
That's $2,000, guys. You just got
yeah. So that was once, and after that, slowly, people kind of started donating, and it generates a decent amount of revenue for me monthly. But if you talk about memberships, that is pretty consistent, and that helps a lot. Also, now it depends on me how I monetize the subscriber base, right? How I do my brand deals. That is another addition to the entire YouTube system, and that I know how to do, and that's what I'm doing. So these three, four things are really helping me. On the other hand, the super chat, when a person super chats, like the message gets pinned for a certain amount of time. So now I, with the Red Bull gaming room kind of a thing, I'm planning that with the Red Bull, and after that happens, now they have this if IFTT kind of a integration. So once you kind of integrate that, now you can change the entire color of the room and etc. So that a lot of fans like that, and I have seen, if I, if someone is super chatting me, and I maybe thank them in my own fun way, that's what they like, and that's how the revenue multiplies. Okay, this guy is responding to my messages if I'm giving a certain amount, and he's appreciating that. But earlier, what I used to do was, okay, thank you guys, it was a normal thank you, but then this is what I noticed: if I'm thanking them in my own fun way and actually appreciating it upfront, this is what they're enjoying a lot more, and that's why the revenue is multiplying.
So, Rushi, does that mean that all of you guys, really cool esports companies, they're your social clubs and networks in itself who are monetizing off a certain community? And are you going through social networks and that's why you're valued so much?
Well, I would say both yes and no. Firstly, a lot of content creators and pro athletes, especially like Ankit, have been doing really well. I think what YouTube has done with the entire super chat and the subscription model is really working well. But as Ankit said, the one thing is everyone is having to innovate and figure out new things along the way and find ways to monetize their existing audience outside of these factors as well. The one thing that we've been doing is we've also, rather than hoping for a change, and we've been really focusing on educating the masses on esports. And I really like what Ralph said, because we've been very bullish on NFTs and blockchain, and we've really been experimenting on that factors. And we spend a lot of time really brainstorming and figuring out what new we can do, what more value we can add, how else we can monetize the audience. And in fact, we'll be announcing it this week, but towards the end of the month, we're hosting an event, and that's completely based on a blockchain. We're going to be involving cryptocurrency and esports and try some fun integrations just to make it more engaging for the audience. As Ankit said, when he engages with the audience, he gets a much better response. So we're trying to do like a little community event, kind of that's centered around Dogecoin. So there's just some fun integrations we have. But yeah, we are really looking towards figuring out what new things we can do and really innovating on the path of what we can do, because esports is still so new and a lot of teams are still kind of literally thrown in there the deep end, trying to figure out how they can monetize and how they can actually survive and make money. Because we've seen, I'm sure Akshat, you've been around so long, you've seen so many esports organizations in India shut down because they couldn't figure out the monetization model. So that's just the war path that we're on right now, to educate the masses, grow the existing audience, and figure out and really excel at the monetization.
No, and I take this. I'm about to go ahead and close this, but what I hear from you guys is something really exciting. So I love the fact that Ralph is saying, look, if we have to go ahead and have this scarcity at the top of content works really well, because that's the nature of extreme. There are not many Olympics that are happening, right? So you don't want to go ahead and have that. But I also like what Satya said. Look, we might want many more verticals or methods for people to go ahead and start making money. From Ankit, there has always been, hey, I think it's time to level up the gamers themselves to go ahead and say, this is legit. So if you want everything else to be legit, you've got to be legit too. So stick around, be committed, be professional. Chris, I loved what your comments have been around. Hey, how do you go ahead and not only monetize other forms of content, but also how the rest of the world is looking at India just suddenly evolving on its own, in its own different method. And I wish we had a publisher here, because that would have just completed everything, but maybe next time. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate the time. Satya, Ralph, Ankit, Rushi, appreciate it. Back to you, Paro.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Akshay. Thank you so much for moderating it so well. And thank you so much to all our panelists for joining us today and for sharing your insights and presenting to us a wonderful session. With this, we come to the end of this session, and we'll be starting the next session for the day at 4:45 p.m. Would request everyone to kindly stay tuned. Thank you again, one and all.
Hi, Silpa.
Hi.
Okay, I'm giving you the right.
Okay, thank you.
Now you can taste. Yes, it's visible.
Hi, are you able to see my entire screen or just the presentation is visible?
Just a presentation.
Okay, cool. Okay. Will you let me know when we're good to start?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Hi, good evening, Shilpa.
Hi. Hi there.
Hi, are we good to go?
Yeah, I'm good to go.
Okay, I'll just hand it over to you. Welcome back, everyone. We now move on to the next session. That's a corporate talk. And today we have our experts from YouTube for the corporate talk with us. The eminent speaker from YouTube is Ms. Shilpa Keswani, Manager Content Partnerships, YouTube. She's going to talk about YouTube for gaming. And without further delay, may I request Shilpa to please take the session forward. Over to you, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Payal. Hi, hello, everyone. I am Shilpa, and I am currently leading the gaming creator partnerships at YouTube. What I'd like to do is I'd like to start with just a quick look back at what 2020 has been for gaming on YouTube. YouTube gaming had its biggest year ever in 2020 with 100 billion watch time hours and 40 million plus active gaming channels. Of this, about 10 billion hours of watch time came from video game live streams. We'll give you a moment to digest that because when we saw the stats, it was staggering. And as we see the consumption of mobile games continuing to surge, this growth mirrors locally too, with the number of viewers on mobile gaming content on YouTube growing rapidly as well. Watch time hours of the platform watch time hours for gaming content in Q2 of 2020 grew by 2 times compared to the same time in 2019. And this growth is coming not just from the traditional Hindi and English languages, but from the regional languages like Tamil, Telugu, Malayalam, Marathi as well. To put it a little bit more in context, about 64% of game searches in India came from cities outside of the metros between February to April 2020. And we have seen that live streaming continues to be one of the most popular formats of engagement for creators, with our watch time increasing by 10 times over the last 3 years. And just like many changes in consumer behaviors across different industries in India, we owe the revolution in gaming to the smartphone access and the plummeting data costs that have helped democratize the access of games to a whole new generation of gamers. In fact, as per the Google Trends, and this is just a fun fact, we saw a 150% increase in searches for the best gaming phone year on year last year. At nearly 700 million internet users in India, and a majority accessing it through the smartphones, the stage could not be readier for the mobile game publishers, developers, as well as advertisers to engage with their audience via YouTube. And why we say this is because the motivator for users to be online is not just to entertain themselves. Accessibility combined with social interaction through games is enabling the streamers to try out more and more titles that are not limited just to the first-person shooter games. And amongst the most watched genres on YouTube, we see a range from action to sandbox to role-play titles finding favor with their audiences. And while a lot of the research says that Indian gamers tend to prefer action games followed by strategy and casual games, there is an opportunity for most game genres to find an audience if you find the right fit and model and partnership. And to put that a little bit more in context, gamers and their audience are more and more open to trying new games now more than ever. And it's worth noticing, like, over the last few months itself, we have seen titles like Fall Guys, Among Us, Valorant growing in popularity, in addition to the top titles that have sort of maintained their position. But this phenomena has ranged across genres also, where we've seen mastery games like chess growing in popularity, with casual play with Scribble, Ludo, etc., taking over, debunking the myth that YouTube works only for action and first-person shooter games. Right from stand-up comics to entertainment creators to leading gamers, it has literally opened doors for more title experimentation, creating opportunities for more publishers to engage with gaming influencers who can take their audience through their gaming journeys in interesting ways. And even for advertisers, opening doors to engage and connect with this new wave of audience as well as creators. And very often we do get why YouTube. You ask the question. It is because 58% of the gamers say that they are discovering games via YouTube. So what we've tried to do is, in order to try and summarize, how do we leverage YouTube and engage with these gamers in order to find discovery and downloads and drive up actives or whatever KPI that the game developers and publishers may have, is drawn out three guiding principles that can lay the foundation of how one can win with game marketing on YouTube. Tip number one, drive interest and downloads through influencer engagement, which cuts across genres. A recent study that was done with Google Play in partnership with James Day and Jagex tracked data from 7 YouTube creator campaigns for the role-playing game Old School RuneScape. And they found that the Google Play Store attributed to 357% higher downloads than what was measured via tracking links. In addition, 50% of the new installs attributed to video happened within the first 30 minutes after watching the content, which just goes on to demonstrate the profound impact of influencer campaigns that are not seen through many other marketing touchpoints. And why this is because gaming influencers are the new athletes. The Gen Z gamers are engaging with YouTube not just to be entertained, but also to upskill, to learn, and connect by watching the gaming influencers for their reviews, as they play their walkthroughs, and when they are taking part in gaming tournaments. And how developers and publishers can engage is basically trying to keep up the excitement and relevance by celebrating big moments with their creator community. While acquiring new gamers and players is important, creating unique ongoing experiences that keep them engaged with your content is equally important. So giving the creators an opportunity to experiment and try something new. Whether you're in the business of whether you're offering mobile game players an opportunity to battle with friends, do racing or puzzles, there are thousands of games and brands that are vying for the players' attention. So, be in sync with the community. And this is particularly important during the game's maintenance and technical updates as well. Tip two, create a buzz and excitement to deepen the relationships with the fans. For developers focused on creating game services with longevity, there is a continued desire to innovate and expand to new game and content formats, which goes beyond the video on demand to keep players invested in their games. We have an example here of developer Supercell that turns to YouTube premieres to help fans virtually gather, connect in real time, and enjoy new gaming updates together. Just like any, imagine the opening night of a new movie that you would watch with your community. And the insight here is that Gen Z gamers are really finding a way to socialize through a shared collaborative interest. They are seeking a sense of community, a sense of belonging and growth, connecting them across the country, across region, across the globe with one single common thread. And tip number three is leverage live. Live viewers typically watch 4 times longer compared to the content on demand. We have an example of Pearl Abyss, who is the developer of Black Desert Mobile, who turns to YouTube Live during the maintenance period as a form of continued engagement, filling the downtime with real-time interactions. And rather than disengaging with the fans during the maintenance of the game, they actually direct players to the YouTube live Q&A sessions. And this strategy has proven to be highly effective for them, delivering 2x the engagement versus similar video on demand content, so much so that 80% of their new channel subscribers have come via live events in the last 6 months. So I mean, there is a lot of opportunity for the developers to identify and work with the YouTubers and engage YouTube to fulfill your need and requirement as such. Just to wrap up, if we had to say, like, 2019 was the inflection point where the game decided who would become the largest gamer. 2020 is when you saw a wave of democratization where we have seen influencers taking to gaming from entertainment and across verticals. They have experimented with formats to make gaming more palatable for the uninitiated, where we've seen music and comedy and gaming sort of crossing over. And the core gamers have also seen success with multiple titles because their audience also became more and more open-minded about the experimentation that they were doing. And with that, there is a lot of hope on 2021 as the gamers as well as their audience mature, that this may be the year where the more titles will find more discovery as we see the market maturing. With that, I had a very short presentation. I'm happy to take questions if there are any.
Hi, Shilpa. Sorry.
Hi, Payal.
Yeah, so we
Do we
don't
have
have
any
any
questions?
questions.
Okay,
No, so we don't have
sure,
any questions from the audience.
sure.
Yeah, we were
Okay,
just trying to, wait for a couple of minutes, but yeah, I don't think we do have any. So we'll close it there.
okay, all right, no problem.
Sure. So thank you so much, Shilpa. Thank you for taking out time and joining us for the India Gaming Show. It was great to have you on board. With this, we come to the end of day one of week two in the third edition of India Gaming Show and Conference 2021 being organized by CII in association with the Indian Digital Gaming Society. I would like to once again thank our partners, Google, Western Digital, Jet Synthesis Private Limited, Scientific Games, Hangama Games, Nodwin Gaming, Asus, Critical X Exports, Game.tv, and our content partner KPMG for extending their support. My sincere thank you to all the dignitaries and participants who could join us today. I would request participants to kindly visit the virtual exhibition if not already done. We'll start our day two of week two for the conference tomorrow at 3 p.m. With some very interesting sessions and eminent speakers joining us. So do join us tomorrow, 3 p.m. Have a wonderful evening, one and all. Thank you and stay safe.
Thank you.
Thanks, Shilpa.